Exploration. It's daylight, you and your friends go to the woods, there's a riverbank, there are leaves on the ground. All you want to do is go around, find trees to climb, enjoy your time there, and explore the area. Escape. You and your friends are taken to the woods. There's a riverbank, but the other side is too far away for you to get across unnoticed. The leaves on the ground make it nearly impossible to hide your location from the person you managed to slip away from. You try to find any way to leave his line of sight, maybe find a tree to climb. You just want to spend as little time there as possible and leave the area. It's interesting to me that as old as the Metroidvania genre now is, we haven't exactly seen any of its format get flipped on its head. This is a genre that feels like it's now got this perfectly refined formula, but it does have a formula nonetheless. I've played a ton of great Metroidvania games in the past, and some of them land amongst my favorite games ever. But while some will bring in a darker aesthetic, or more deadly enemies, or a focus on platforming, or a funny story, or any number of things to make them stand out, at the end of the day, each of these games have an identical skeleton, especially as it pertains to exploration. Usually you're given a map, though on rare occasions you're left a little bit blind, and you slowly uncover parts of the map and run into blocks you can't break or heights you can't reach or any number of obstructions to certain areas, leaving them closed off to you for now. Eventually you'll find an upgrade of some sorts which will allow you to get past that obstruction, unlocking a new section of the map that you couldn't previously explore. Rinse and repeat till you're done, and obviously there's usually a driving force for all of this. You're not just asked to clear a map and go off. Now, I'm not complaining that all these games are following this layout, and nor could I really, because it's one of the foundations of the whole genre. If you change this up too much, it's no longer within this classification of video games. I'm good with all of this. However, I've noticed that there hasn't been an attempt by any recent game to recontextualize this a little bit, to stretch and mold this idea ever so slightly in a different way. And how fitting is it that the game that finally tried their hand at just that comes from the granddaddy franchise of this whole genre? Metroid. The EMMIs from Metroid Dread have already kind of solidified themselves in my head as one of my favorite video game enemies ever, as well as being one of my favorite new mechanics in a game in a good while. The only thing that I don't like about them is that every time I hear EMMI, it sounds like high school rich girl shorthand for the word enemy. You know, like, I used to have besties, but now I got EMMIs. Haha. It's all I can think about whenever I hear the word. I don't know why or how my mind ended up there, but I hate it, so I'm just gonna call them Robits for the rest of the video. Essentially, what the Robits do in this game is relentlessly chase you down the second that they've sniffed you out. They have a view cone that's pretty clearly visible, but if you're making a ruckus somewhere near their much larger sound sphere, then they'll work their way towards you pretty quickly. And you need to make sure to take in all of your surroundings as quickly as possible and try to find a route for yourself to not only get out of the way, but also escape the sound sphere as well, so the Robit will go back to its idle state. This is the flip that I'm talking about, and it's the same flip that I tried to demonstrate at the top of this video. Every other Metroidvania I've played, the pace of exploration has been entirely under my agency. I can choose to look in every nook and cranny, and the only thing ever stopping me is maybe I die to the enemies there. But if I do manage to expunge them from this mortal realm, then going around looking through every crevice and every unstable wall is on me and the upgrades I have. The pace is controlled by the player. In Metroid Dread, every Robit section is paced by the Robit. You're no longer exploring the world of Metroid Dread, you're escaping it. And everything that made its basic platforming and exploration fun is now the exact thing that you need to be hyper aware of. Will this help me or hinder me? Your intentions flip on a dime, and for a moment you're playing something entirely different from the normal game. As the game goes on, these Robits get faster and faster, eventually exceeding your top speed. And while the game allows you to counter that a little bit with the Phantom Cloak, a last-ditch move that hides you from your enemy for a limited time, it makes sure to never remove the tension and the focus on outsmarting and outplaying your enemy through environment alone. You can't spam your cloak, it can only be activated when your ability bar is full. And since you move slower in this mode, you still need to use it in strategic moments so that you don't accidentally find yourself directly in the Robit's path, cloaked but with no escape. As your foe gets faster later in the game, your training wheels are effectively taken off. Before you could give these things the rigmarole, you could just outrun them as long as you had your wits about you and were aware of dead ends and where your path was leading you. But now you need to think on the fly 3-4 steps ahead to perform complex maneuvers which will take as little time as possible for you to actually perform in order to escape the enemy's grasp. Every half-second lost to animations or transformations is important now. The area isn't just a fun maze to explore, it's a puzzle that you need to solve in order to confuse your opponent, and what helps even more with that is the top-notch AI of our creepy robot friends. The layout of areas which Robits are able to access are designed not just around you, but around your hunter as well. The path you took to evade this monster is not necessarily the path they will choose to follow. Some Sometimes they'll cut you off, they'll recognize where you want to go, and they will get there before you by using an alternate route, and you might need to quickly ditch your plan and reverse. I can't stress how clever this AI is. Sometimes your focus is so narrow on your own moves that you fail to pay attention where the robot went. And he could be above you or below you or behind you, and you need to make the decision whether it's better to wait and see where they're coming from and if you can afford that time, or if your only option is to trust your instincts, pick a path, and hope you guessed right. I never stopped being entertained by how differently I was forced to look at the map during the robot sections. It was like everything I had grown accustomed to over the years of playing this genre was for an instant thrown off its axis. And you might think that all of this talk about the feeling of the escape being unique to Metroid Dread is silly considering, I mean, look at the Ori games. They had tons of sections where you'd have to be aware of what was in front of you and try to escape the clutches of whatever evil was pursuing our poor main character. But the difference is that escape is linear, it's a selected route, it's a set piece. It's the trying to escape to the light at the end of a tunnel while the world is crumbling around you, the Crash Bandicoot being chased by a boulder. This is the being stuck on a spaceship with an alien, using vents and grates and hiding in lockers to avoid or sneak past the monster. That idea is married perfectly with the established Metroidvania map formula to create something familiar and new at the same time. Fear. I wasn't ever shaking in my custom baby seal leather boots at the sight of a robot, but through the sound design, music, creepy animations, and the relentless pursuit of this creature, I did always feel hurried and panicked in these sections. I wasn't scared, but I did not want to get caught, and if I was ever grabbed, I felt deflated and outsmarted like you do in a survival horror game. The absolute final chance that the game gives you is to parry the robot as it's about to attack, but to my best estimation, the window of timing for this lasts for about 300 milliseconds, aka the edge of a normal person's reaction time. Nintendo pulled no punches, making sure that you never felt guaranteed to survive at any point. Even with the 2 chances to escape every time, it was always a question mark. You almost had to predict when the attack was coming since the delay before the attack is not always the same. For a brief spell, it's just you and your enemy, and you almost feel the anticipation in the still air, and every time I escaped, it was because I almost felt the attack coming, not because I saw it. Even when you obtain the means to defeat these creatures, you gain the ability to turn the tide. The only way that you can succeed is through the same understanding of the AI and level design that you used to evade its grasp before. You need to usher your foe to a spot where you have the advantage and you have the time to unleash hell on it. You never go from hunted to the hunter. Every moment you are entirely on your heels, but it's up to you whether you're escaping or fighting to use the map to your advantage in a way that we've never been asked to do before. I'll admit that the one decision made by Nintendo that removed some fear factor from the equation was their handling of checkpointing. They would usually save your progress as long as you didn't exit to the menu or quit the game, at most a couple of rooms back. So there's not much of a consequence to getting caught and killed, and that makes it easier for you to brush off your defeats. And while I really like this as somebody who hates trekking the same path 100 times in Metroidvanias when I'm dying too much in an area, as far as the fear and the robot mechanics go, this is the one shortcoming. But in terms of the actual sequences, everything from the AI to the level design to the sense of urgency to the animations to the fear is perfect. And while some people have said that Metroid Dread doesn't reinvent the wheel or stray too far from the formula it created all those years ago, I believe that what this game has done should serve as the basis of more inventive explorations of the genre than we've ever seen before. It feels like the first step of understanding that these building blocks are more malleable than we thought, that this type of map design isn't just a vessel for staggered exploration. The most recent Metroid game did in fact bring us something new and important. Dread.